Hello and welcome to a number talk. What we are doing today is looking at the expression 16 times 7, and we're using mental math. That means no paper, no pencil, to try to solve this in our heads and to keep track of which strategy we used. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Pause the video, solve 16 times 7 in your head any way you can, and then we'll come back together and look at all the different ways you could have done it. All right, so first we can look at 16 times 7. We can use the distributive property to break up our 16. We're going to look at 16 as, instead of one big whole, we're going to break it up into 8 plus 8. So you see I cut it in half. We're going to take the 7 and we're going to distribute it out to both 8s. So I'm going to end up making partial products. I'm going to take two smaller multiplication problems. So 8, I'm going to multiply this first, 8 times 7. That's an easy 56. That's a fact. Then the other leftover 8 is also multiplied by 7. That's also 56. And so now all I need to do is add my 56 and 56. 5 and 5, that makes 10. 6 and 6 is 12, so that's 112 because those 5s are really 50s. And hopefully that's the answer you got, 112. Here's another way we can use the distributive property. If we take our 16 times 7, instead of breaking up that 16 into 8 and 8, let's use place value. Let's say 10 plus 6, and that is going to think of it as expanded form. That 10 plus 6 is going to give me two smaller partial products to use, and we're going to distribute the 7 out to both the 10 and the 6. So we're going to say 10 times 7, and that's a 70. Now I've got this 6, still times that 7, that's a 42, and that's going to be 112. Same answer. Here's a third way we can use distributive property, but this time we're going after that 7. We're going to leave the 16 the way it is. We're going to say that 7 is really 5 plus 2. So it doesn't have to be even when we break up a number using the distributive property. It just needs to be easy to multiply mentally. And anytime we can multiply by 5 or a 2, that's going to be super easy. So we're going to take the 16 and we're going to multiply that by the 5. So 16 times 5, that's 80, because 5 times 10 is 50, and 6 times 5 is 30. Now we got to take that 16 and distribute that out to the 2 as well. So 16 times 2. So I've got double my 16. You see how easy that is? 32. Add up the 80 and 32, and voila, 112. Maybe we can use some doubling and halving. So doubling and halving lets us know that if we take our factors here, we can take one factor and cut it in half. So I'm going to take my 18, cut it in half. So that's why this 8 has got a gray box right here. I'm going to get rid of half of my 16, but in order to keep a balanced equation, I need to double the other part right there. So that's going to be 8 times 14. So I've got two 7s. So I doubled one factor, 14, and I cut the other factor in half, 8, and it still is going to end up as the same thing. 8 times 10 is 80. 8 times 4 is 32. That's 112. So doubling and halving is not always useful, but when it is easy to use. Now let's look at compensation. So instead of my 16 times 7, I'm going to say, you know what, if I were to add 3 more to that 7, that's going to be 16 times 10. And 16 times 10, super easy. All of this right here, that's 160, because we know how to multiply by 10. But remember, I added an extra 3 groups of that 16. So what I need to do is I need to take away 3 groups of 16. And that 3 groups of 16, that's 48. So really it's 160 minus 48. And we can, if you want to visualize it right there, we can put that right there. And that's going to get you your 112. And let's take a look at the associative property next. So the associative property is the grouping property. So I'm going to take my 16 times 7, and I'm going to take my 16, and I'm going to say, you know what, let's break that up. I'm not going to add this time. I'm going to keep multiplying. 2 times 8. So I can put these into different groups, and I can say instead of 2 times 8 times 7 and keeping the 2 and 8 together, I'm just going to shift my parentheses. Watch this. Two groups of 8 times 7. The associative property lets me change the groups of my factors. It's the grouping property. It also works with addition if you have 3 or more addends. With multiplication, it works with 3 or more factors. So now I've got two groups of 8 groups of 7. So here we go. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So here's my 8 groups of 7 right here. So 8 groups of 7, that's 56. And then I ended up having 2 of those groups. That's that right there. 2 groups of my 8 groups of 7. That's 56 and 56. We've already done that. That's 112. And then finally, let's look at 7s again. We can't break down that 7 because that is a prime number. So the only number we can really break down is that 16. And instead of the 2 times 8, let's make it 4 times 4 times 7. And then we'll do that same thing. Let's just shift this out and let's say, you know what, let's shift those parentheses over. Let's make 4 groups of 7. So I want 4 groups of 4 groups of 7. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 4 groups of 7. That's my 28. Now I'm going to skip count by 28 till I get up what I need to. 28. Then I've got 56. And double that again, I've got another 56. And I've got 112 all together. Those are my 4 groups of 7. So those are just a few ways that you can use the distributive property, the associative property, to solve the expression 16 times 7. If you found another way, that is wonderful. Go ahead and drop that as a comment in the video. Teachers, if you want a copy of the slide deck, you can find it on my website, 5minutemath.net.